A decision is imminent in the case of Bruce Lehrmann versus Network 10 and Lisa Wilkinson, the defamation case that has gripped Australia. I'm Claire Harvey, editorial director of The Australian and host of our daily news podcast, The Front. I'm joined by Ellie Dudley, our legal affairs correspondent. We've both been in court since November, covering this sprawling matter, which has dragged in the law, politics, sex, drugs, and a bit of rock and roll. Ellie, there's a judgment coming down on Monday. Justice Lee has actually been pretty quick for a federal court judge, hasn't he?
Yeah, definitely. Considering this case started towards the end of November, to turn around a judgment, by the middle of April is pretty good for a federal court judge. We were expecting it a couple of weeks ago, but unfortunately that was thrown out due to new evidence that came up from a former producer at Network 7, a man named Taylor Auerbach, who had been part of the production team at 7 Spotlight that had interviewed Bruce Lehrmann after his criminal trial was aborted. That was quite a ride, wasn't it?
It's been a bit of a culture war, really. We've seen expose the tensions between Network 10, Network 7 and plenty of other media organisations who've been expressing very strong views about this matter. Spotlight is a edgy tabloid TV current affairs program on Network 7. It is famous for going after other people's journalism, and in this matter it went after the journalism of Network 10 and of news.com.au, exploring whether the original Brittany Higgins story was justified, whether it was true, and giving Bruce Lehrmann his opportunity to have his say. The former producer of that program has alleged all sorts of strange goings on at 7, including the provision of cocaine and prostitutes, at least to himself. He has alleged that it was also provided to Bruce Lehrmann. 7 Network has denied that that was with their knowledge or approval. What do we make in the end of Taylor Auerbach's evidence?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because he was also claiming things like that Bruce Lehrmann had been provided confidential documents during his criminal rape trial for the alleged rape of Brittany Higgins in Parliament House. Taylor Auerbach was saying that Bruce provided 7 Spotlight with documents from that case, that he was provided, as a party to that case, that were confidential documents, provided them to 7 Spotlight for them to use in their broadcast. Now, Taylor Auerbach sat on the stand and he told the court a lot of very interesting things, and at one point Justice Michael Lee piped up and said that clearly Taylor Auerbach is somebody with an axe to grind, somebody who has it out for his former employer 7 and various colleagues that he worked with there. Whether or not that means that he's telling the truth or not is yet to be determined, and I think that's something that Justice Lee is going to have to address when he hands down his judgment on Monday.
That was Network 10's attempt to demonstrate that Bruce Lehrmann is not a reliable witness, that he was in contempt of court, and that he can't be believed about anything, including whether or not he raped Brittany Higgins. Yeah,
absolutely. It goes to credit, which is interesting because we know towards the end of the defamation trial last year that Justice Lee had already found some credit issues with Bruce Lehrmann and also Brittany Higgins. So whether or not this new evidence from 7 is going to be consequential is something we're going to have to learn on Monday.
And that brings us to what are we going to be watching for when this judgment is handed down on Monday. You'll be able to watch it live at theaustralian.com.au, and I'll be watching for what the judge finds about who lied. I think it's been admitted by lawyers for Brittany Higgins and lawyers for Bruce Lehrmann that each of those people have lied at various points along the way. It's whether those lies were big or little, how consequential they were, how understandable they were. What else will you be looking out for?
Yeah, well, it's so interesting how this defamation trial has just become a de facto rape trial. We've seen all of the evidence that was presented during Bruce Lehrmann's criminal trial in 2022 dragged up again, as well as additional evidence about how Network 10 handled Brittany Higgins' allegations, whether or not they treated Bruce Lehrmann reasonably in developing their project interview with Brittany Higgins. But I think that the thing that's going to keep people glued to their screen is whether or not it is found that Bruce Lehrmann raped Brittany Higgins in Parliament House, of course, on the balance of probabilities, not beyond reasonable doubt, which is the civil standard of proof, not the criminal standard.
There's another question just beneath that, which is what the judge finds about whether or not they had sex. There are all sorts of possibilities about the way that encounter unfolded, from they had sex where she was not consenting, to they had sex where he believed she was consenting, to where they had sex where she was consenting, and then that they didn't have sex at all, which of course is Bruce Lehrmann's claim.
Of course.
He's gone in with this very bold claim that there was no sexual activity whatsoever, and that goes to the question of whether he's a liar.
Yeah, and if what Ten has argued at least, if Justice Lee finds that the pair did have sex, Network 10 has said that Bruce Lehrmann should only be paid really nominal damages, as much as maybe $1, because they say that he would be such an unmeritorious plaintiff at that point, somebody who had brought this huge defamation case to the federal court based on a lie, that therefore he shouldn't be awarded many damages at all, if costs.
Sue Chrysanthu, counsel for Lisa Wilkinson, advanced a really interesting argument right in her closing submissions that she suggested to the judge that it was possible that Bruce Lehrmann knew that they had had sex, believed that it was consensual sex, but then spoke to his lawyers early on in the piece, who told him, don't tell us anything, don't tell us what you've done, but just know that a very drunk person cannot consent to sex legally in this jurisdiction. And Sue Chrysanthu's hypothesis, which she very carefully put to the judge, was, maybe someone in his situation would then make the decision to just deny everything and cross his fingers that there was no DNA evidence or other kinds of corroborating evidence to back up her claim.
And if that is a gamble that Bruce Lehrmann has taken, it's a very, very risky gamble, because at that stage, he didn't know whether or not Brittany Higgins had gone to the doctor, he didn't know whether or not she had reported it to police. So for him to just say, no, we didn't have sex at all, didn't know if she had gotten a rape kit, anything like that, was a very risky gamble. Of course, we know that he completely denies that sexual intercourse ever took place at all. So that is what he stands by, and it's what he will continue to stand by, I'm sure.
And of course, one of his barristers, Steve Wybrow SC, argued to the judge that would be the gamble of his life. That would be a totally unreasonable gamble for a young man to take. That a young man presented with the notion that someone who he thought had been a consenting partner was accusing him of rape would be more likely to tell the truth.
Yeah, absolutely. So that all sort of goes to the truth defence. We know that Ten has put up a truth defence. That's its number one defence, saying, hey, Bruce, we didn't defame you because you actually did rape Brittany Higgins. But they've also put up a qualified privilege defence as well, saying that they acted reasonably in their reporting of the matter in their interview with Brittany Higgins, and it was in the public interest. How do you think that they'll go on qualified privilege?
I think Ten's internal workings have been exposed as not ideal. I think it's clear that they, although they didn't identify Bruce Lehrmann by name, they absolutely did identify him. That's another critical point that the judge will have to determine. Was he clearly identified by this program? I think it's clear that he was. And then, was their journalism reasonable? Did they go to him with enough notice? Did they genuinely seek his side of the story? I think they went to him they gave him a weekend, basically, to answer these questions. He didn't respond. He says that he didn't even see their inquiries. They have questioned whether that is plausible. And then the third thing is the rigour of their journalism in probing the inconsistencies in Brittany Higgins' story, of which there were quite a lot. And maybe at the age of 23, we all would have had inconsistencies in our stories after an event like this. What do you think about how well Ten has demonstrated that it did make reasonable efforts to do the journalism properly?
It's interesting. It was interesting seeing it from Lisa Wilkinson's defence. She basically came out and said that she wasn't really a journalist, that she was just the television presenter in this matter, and she had a team of journalists and producers working behind her to interrogate these claims. Things like, the photo of the bruise that Brittany Higgins provided to the project, which was aired during the interview, which she said was caused by being pinned against a couch by Bruce Lehrmann during the alleged rape. Something that Bruce Lehrmann's lawyers pressed is that they didn't properly check the metadata to see when that image was taken. They alleged that image was completely fabricated. Whether or not the project and the Network 10 producers should have probed that image further is again something that Justice Lee will have to determine when he hands down his judgment on Monday.
He'll also have to look at whether it's plausible that Ten didn't really investigate Brittany Higgins' initial claim to them in a 5-hour pre-interview that the government might have wiped her phone, that she didn't have any photos, any WhatsApp messages, any text messages relating to the night in question, because Ms mysteriously enough, the government for which she was still working at the time that she did the interview had remotely wiped the phone. Lisa Wilkinson was sceptical about that, wasn't she?
She was completely sceptical about that, but she, and you could see that in messages and emails that she sent amongst her producers, which were tendered to the federal court and made public online. Again, that's going to be something that Justice Lee is going to have to investigate and determine whether or not they made reasonable efforts to see whether or not Brittany Higgins was telling the truth in that instance.
Many of the messages that she had been sending around that time were subsequently retrieved from her phone by the Australian Federal Police, and much has been made of a Celebrite report which revealed huge numbers of texts, including some exchanges where she had deleted one message in an exchange with a friend or with her former boyfriend Ben Dillaway that she believed was not going to help her case. And of course, again, maybe at 23, in this very frightening situation, we all might have made poor decisions about what to delete and what to keep.
Yeah, before you hand your phone over to the police, especially knowing concerns that whether or not all of these messages are going to be made public, your life is going to be rifled through, which of course is the circumstance that a woman has to go through if she's going to report her alleged rape. Deleting those messages or not, whether that is going to be something that is used against Network 10 in these instances, again, we'll find out on Monday.